Let's start with the code to render microposts. As with users, we're going to define a micropost partial. Remember how that works here. We've got app, views, users, and then we have underscore user.html.erb. We're going to define the analog of this for microposts. That means we need a micropost directory here in the views, and the easiest way to get that is to generate the micropost controller. So let's do that here. Remember, controllers are plural. That didn't generate any views, but we can add a view here. Let's open that up. This will be similar to user. Let's take a look at that. Just do this. We'll have an li, but in this case, we're going to give it an ID as well. This is useful especially because microposts are coming out in a specific order. And this also opens up the possibility of testing the microposts and maybe even manipulating them with JavaScript. This isn't strictly necessary, but it's a good idea. So we want to give it the ID of the micropost, so we can just use embedded Ruby like this. Micropost.id. We can't do just ID by itself. We couldn't do this because you actually can't start CSS IDs with an integer. So we put micropost dash to make it valid. And then let's link to the gravatar. You can look at the mockup here. I'll link to the gravatar for the user. Now you might wonder where this micropost is going to come from here. Remember the way that this partial works over here with this user partial is that we called it using render at users. That's from the user's index. Right, we have render at users. Because this partial is named user and this is a collection of things with class user, there's automatically a local variable called user. That means we're going to be able to do something like this, render at micropost. And then inside here, there will automatically be a micropost variable. And we can get the user associated with that micropost using micropost.user. So we can do link to gravatar for micropost.user. Let's make it size 50, a little smaller than the default. And then the link should go to the profile page, which is just user path of user, in this case, user path of micropost.user. But as usual, we can omit this part and just link right to the user. If we look at our mockup, you can see we want the content and then how long ago it was posted. And for simplicity, I also want to include the user's name with a link, because that will let us reuse this on the feed. Let's do that here. Let's put this inside a span. Let us style it. And the content will also go into span with class content. Remember, this is escaped out automatically, so anything dangerous in this content will be escaped out and rendered harmless. And then we want to put how long ago it was posted. Give it a timestamp class. And this is a really cool Rails helper. Posted time ago in words. Give it a timestamp, and that's micropost.createdAt. Posted time ago in words ago. Save that. Now let's write the code to display the micropost. It's going to go on the show page. Show page for users is just the profile page. So after this aside here, I'm going to put a div this is a bootstrap class. And now let's say if there are any microposts, put in a header here with the count, and then display the microposts. Here we're using the association again, if at user.microposts. .any question mark. Put in an h3. And the count. By the way, this count is done in the database. Rails doesn't pull all the microposts out of the database and then see how long the resulting collection is. This is actually really efficient. It's done right in the database. This is also the reason that count and length are different for paginated objects. Remember, we saw in a previous lesson that length returned the length of the actual collection, but count returned all of them, just the total number in the database. So here, we're going to see that at user.micropost is going to be paginated. We can get this sort of count here by using at user.micropost.count. Now we need to render the microposts. Because they come out in a particular order, I'm going to use an ordered list with the class microposts. And here we can use this trick, render at microposts. This requires a collection called at microposts. We'll define that in a moment, but first I want to note that we also want to paginate them. Remember here, we want pagination here at the bottom, so that's will paginate. Look at the index. Before we just did will paginate by itself. What this does is looks for an instance variable corresponding to the class of the controller we're in. So in this case, this is the user's controller. So it's looking for a variable called @users, which is in fact defined in the user's controller. Right, that's here, @users equals user.paginate. But here, we're actually still in the user's controller, right? This is the user show page. So in this case, we need to tell will paginate explicitly which collection to paginate, in this case, at micropost. So then over here in the show page, we can do this. Instead of doing at user.micropost, we can do at user.micropost.paginate page of params of page. So it's just like this here, except now we're going through the association. Rails and will paginate are so designed that this will just work, which is really cool. So let's take a look at it. Save this, and go to the user show page. And there's the user profile page, but there aren't any microposts, of course, because we're not showing them if there aren't any, right here. And there aren't any.